So Grace Randolph put out this tweet. Now I can't access it through Twitter because she has me blocked. I'm sorry. Grace Randolph is such a sore loser. I don't care what anyone says. Don't hate her, but like she's just very insecure. But she put out this tweet saying hashtag DC, hashtag DC Studios. I hear that it's going to be a former Batman who cameos at the end of The Flash and could potentially stick around as a new permanent DC Universe Batman. Damian's dad, Pattinson, is still solo. I know who it is, but it could be uncool to reveal the whole thing. Well, I'll say this right now. It's more uncool to just put a picture like this and say, you know what, you guys guess. Like, I don't want to guess. I just want to know which one it is. Like, come on. Uh, and the frustrating thing I have with this is like you're a scooper. Your job is to literally tell it. Like I'm saying this straight up. All scoopers. I don't care which scoopers you support, but all scoopers are useless. At the end of the day, even if they're right, what's the big deal, right? It's like at the end of the day, we only get something spoiled to us in a movie. It's like it's funny because people like to complain about how nowadays movies get spoiled and that they wish that Toby and Andrew had not been revealed in No Way Home. But then it's like y'all go to follow scoopers. It's like scoopers are useless. I'm sorry. I don't care what anyone says. Scoopers are, as a whole, and at least in the movie community, are useless because all they're doing is spoiling stuff, right? Or just telling you to suck up to them because they said so. No, I'll say this: Grace Randolph is somewhat reliable. While I think a lot of times she's gotten things wrong. Well, then again, that doesn't make her reliable, but she's gotten things right. That she's gotten things right. But we're gonna go with this as if maybe it's true. If I think there's one that could be back, it's I think Christian Bale. Christian Bale was an immensely popular Batman. He was loved. Uh, the Dark Knight movie is still to this day one of the most talked about comic book movies of all time. To this day, I always hear people clamoring the movie as the greatest comic book movie of all time. I personally love the movie. I do think it had the best villain in a comic book movie, which is Heath Ledger's Joker. And I'll even make the argument that Heath Ledger's Joker was not only the best comic book performance of all time, but I think it's one of, if not the greatest performance in any movie ever. To me, Heath Ledger as Joker was just so perfect. What Christopher Nolan was able to do with the Batman character and what with the story he was able to create was amazing. I'll admit I'm not the biggest fan of Christian Bale as Batman. I do love his Batman. I think he's great. Oh, but then I am a big fan. Why did I say that? But he's not my favorite. I still think Pattinson's better as a Batman. I think Ben Affleck is till this day my favorite live action Batman. My only issues with the Batman aspect of Christopher Nolan's character is that the action was not all that good. Like the music was great, some of the action was good, but like the fighting with as Batman was like there was like times where I would like look at the Dark Knight and you would see like Batman like hitting people like this. And it's like to this day I laugh at that, but I love the Dark Knight. To me, Batman Begins is a masterpiece in the Batman comic book genre. I think The Dark Knight was top. I think The Dark Knight is one of the best movies of all time. I think it's a top 20 favorite movie of mine. I've rewatched it. I actually, on Batman Day back in 2020, I actually saw the movie in theaters for the first time because when it came out in 2008, I was 6 years old. So even if I did go, I would have forgotten it. But uh, it was one of those movies that kind of changed my perspective in cinema as a whole. But Christian Bale would make a lot of sense. Now I know in The Dark Knight Rises, which I won't lie to you, Dark Knight Rises is one of those movies that the more I rewatch, the more I dislike it. I like it. I think it's a pretty good movie. But like it is definitely not just the weakest of the trilogy, but it's the weakest Nolan film I've seen. And I love Nolan. Nolan's made a lot of great movies. Inception, Insomniac, Interstellar, Memento. There's like a lot of Nolan films I love. I really like Tenet. I thought Tenet was great. And I think Nolan, honestly, and I'll say this straight up, Nolan is probably the only director I can think of from the top of my head that has never made a movie I dislike. Yeah, there's some like Tenet and Dark Knight Rises are definitely on the weaker end, and they're not great movies, but I do ultimately think Nolan. While I don't think I think that still goes to Spielberg, and James Cameron's up there too. I do think Nolan's that one director that's just not never failed to make a bad movie, at least in my eyes. Of course, all film is subjective. You guys are going to disagree, and that's all right. That's what we do this on this channel. But one of the people, so you see Michael Keaton, that one was talked about way before Zaslav came in. That was kind of like the main premise, and I think part of the reason why Batgirl got canceled is because they want to clarify. It's one of the small reasons. I don't think it's a major reason, but they want to clarify that, hey, you know what, he's not coming back. And we also have to remember he did shoot a scene for Aquaman, but then later on they shot a scene for Ben Affleck. And now that Gunn's here, now we don't know if any of those scenes will ever see the light of day. But it does seem likely like Michael Keaton's just not coming back. So don't trust the Michael Keaton part. I do think she's just putting this here. So really the only possible people you see here is George Clooney and Christian Bale. I don't see Michael Keaton coming back, although he is going to be in The Flash. So regardless, you are going to see him come back. So I do think Christian Bale is a high chance. Now, George Clooney, right? Never. I remember when 2020 was around, it was like the weirdest year for movie fans because we got confirmation Jamie Foxx's Electro was coming back. And we got confirmation that Jared Leto's Joker was coming back. And by the way, I like both versions of those characters. Although I did think Electro was a little weak. But we got Jared Leto's Joker coming back on the same year that Jamie Foxx's Electro has come back. Two characters that were not received all that well with the comic book audiences. And I'll say this right now. This would be, if George Clooney comes back, it would be one of the craziest things ever. Because he is literally, everyone loves George Clooney, but I've never, ever heard anyone say a good word of him. I'll say this right now. Batman and Robin is the single worst comic book movie, actually no, Catwoman exists. It's one of the worst comic book movies I've seen. It's one of the worst movies I've seen in general. And I think it's a disgrace to Batman as a whole. I thought they did Robin poorly. I think they did Batman poorly. I think ultimately this movie is a joke. I hate this movie. I've watched it only once in my life. I actually watched this movie when I was like, actually no, like not that long ago, 3 years ago. I was like, hey, I've never seen this movie. Everyone talks about it like it's the worst thing ever. And yeah, it was the worst thing ever. It's the worst Batman movie. But I'll say this. I like George Clooney. And George Clooney still looks like a Bruce Wayne. Right, and I thought as Bruce Wayne, I thought he was solid. I thought George Clooney as Bruce Wayne was solid. As Batman, he was weak. However, that could change. You could get yourself some better writers. You could get yourself a better director. You could get yourself better filmmakers who care far more about the character of the Batman, the Caped Crusader, the Dark Knight, the dark brooding vigilante of Gotham, right? And so ultimately, I think if they were to bring back George Clooney, which I really don't see why, because here's the difference. If you bring back Bale, you have the popularity of The Dark Knight, which is still talked about. Like, these two movies, Batman and Robin and The Dark Knight, are talked about every time. They're always talked about. But there's a difference between the comments. With Batman and Robin, you talk about probably the single worst comic movie of all time. A movie that not only was so bad, but was bad that they stopped making Batman movies for years. Until eventually they gave us Batman Begins. This movie ruined the character of Batman for a long time, right? And ruined the reputation. I remember one time I was talking to my dad. My dad doesn't really watch comic book movies. He doesn't really watch movies in general. He really only likes war movies. But I remember one time we were just talking, and I kind of asked him, because I know Batman has kind of changed over time. I asked him, what was it like? Because around the 90s when Batman was coming out, and he told me that it was popular, and he said that he remembers that Batman kind of changed from being a kid's character to an adult character around the time I was a kid, and what he was referencing was that in the 90s, in the 80s, Batman was seen more as a family-friendly kids character, but now. And what he was trying to tell me is that Batman's now seen as more adult. And he didn't reference Batman Begins essentially, but he was saying that he felt like Batman kind of changed. And in a sense, he is, at least cinematically. In the comic books, obviously, Batman's been dark for a long time, right? And I kind of talked, and I was like, wow, because I like to think of my dad as not the average moviegoer, but as somebody who's a general audience who goes to like 3 movies a year, very picky on their movie selections. They choose it based on how good a trailer is, not based on if it's connected to an IP they like, right? And so I did take his word personally, and Batman and Robin was a detriment to the character of Batman for a long time until eventually Christian Bale saved it. I think Christian Bale, I just don't know why you would bring Clooney with all the baggage that comes with him. It's like bringing back Halle Berry and being like, hey, you know what? You want to do Catwoman? Go ahead, do Catwoman. Like, if they were to do it, it would more just serve as a cameo. That would be at most. It would just be a funny little cameo people would laugh at. But as the DCU Batman, I really hope that Gunn debunks this. Although, I would be fine with Bale. However, the ending of Dark Knight Rises, it was Batman sacrificing himself. And we also have to remember Commissioner Gordon knows Bruce Wayne. Although Commissioner Gordon will keep that a secret. We all know Commissioner Gordon loves Batman, especially that version of Commissioner Gordon. However, if they were to bring him back, I wouldn't mind, because Christian Bale was open to doing comic book stuff. I remember for years it was always Christian Bale would never do this, will never do that. He doesn't want to do comic book movies anymore. And then he came back for Gore the God Butcher. I thought the writing for that character was poor, but I will say Christian Bale's acting was amazing. Like, let's not argue. Thor: Love and Thunder to me was not a good movie. I did not like the movie. I didn't enjoy it. It's all subjective. If you liked it, that's cool. That's all right. It's all subjective. But I personally didn't like it. It's not my cup of tea. I saw it once in the theater and then immediately was like, yeah, this is not for me. But one thing I'll definitely say is Christian Bale was amazing in the role, right? That script may have... I feel like genuinely Thor: Love and Thunder, the script for Thor: Love and Thunder was so much better than the movie itself. Like, I think because Christian Bale's very picky. Christian Bale's not somebody who just does it for the money. Or maybe his mindset has changed. I don't know. But for his reputation has always been that actor who's very cautious with what he gets. And, you know, if he wants to do Batman, I think he could. Honestly, I mean, Christian Bale's still in good shape. He's not that much older. And, like, you could. What I feel like the story could be, you know, Batman, Bruce is living, because remember, Bruce is not dead in the Dark Knight universe. In the Dark Knight universe, it is clarified that, well, it's not clarified in the movie, but Nolan did clarify it later on, years later, and it's kind of obvious when you actually look back in the movie. But Bruce Wayne is not dead. He's just living life outside of Gotham. He's living a normal life. But we have to remember that Bruce Wayne was always like wanting, although, never mind. When you get to the Dark Knight Rises, he did take a retirement for years. So, I don't know. But you could make the argument that they could have Bruce be like maybe the crime has risen so much in Gotham that Bruce can't control himself and decides to go back to Gotham, comes back to be the hero. Everyone's shocked. Everyone thinks he's dead. Because remember, in Gotham, he's perceived as a myth, a legend, somebody, a force of nature, right? How many times all the weapons, he's seen as a legend. So if he was to come back, they'd bump up that legendary status for him, because they'd be like, holy crap, you came back from the dead, man. This guy ain't human. And it would be interesting to have a story where this is a Bruce that came back to Gotham, and throughout the years fought more villains, throughout the years gained more experience, and created a Bat family, and now wait, I just realized you get Damian Wayne and Talia al Ghul while she's dead in the Dark Knight universe. She did have sex with Bruce in the Dark Knight Rises. I mean, I'm seeing it right now. Wait, when the Dark Knight Rises came out? 2012. And right now it is 2023. So the kid would be 11, but by the time the movie releases, I think the movie comes out 2026, he would have been like, I don't know, like 14ish, somewhere around that age. So I'm okay. I'm thinking right now, this is perfect. I think Christian Bale coming back would be perfect, because either way, Dark Knight Rises, I don't think was a perfect ending. I thought it was a great end to the trilogy, but I wouldn't say it's so because there's certain endings that are so perfect that I just don't think it should be touched. Star Wars Return of the Jedi, I thought that ending was perfect. Lord of the Rings Return of the King, I thought that movie was perfect. Endgame was a perfect ending to that core elements of the Avengers. There's a lot of stories that end, but Dark Knight Rises wasn't one of them. It was a great ending, but it wasn't a perfect ending to where you can't retcon or change things, like, you know. So that's how I see it. But with Clooney, I just don't see any reason. Why with Clooney? Why would you? Right? With Clooney, you just get the baggage of him having been a horrible Batman, right? I've never met anyone else say that they loved Clooney as Batman. I know, and the one benefit I can see is he is a known Batman, right? All publicity is good publicity, as the saying goes. And also, George Clooney is a very popular guy. He's a very well-known actor. He's very respected. So you could make that argument. Every other argument, I just don't see it. Now, with Michael Keaton, like I was saying earlier, I just don't see it possible based on how everything's changed ever since the Hamada era, right? I already went into that earlier. I here's why I don't think Keaton. Because the Brave and the Bold, the Batman is still going to be a Batman that fights. How do you do that with Michael Keaton's Batman? Especially if I'm fine with the Flash, but like with everything after the Flash, like how much more story do you have to tell with that this age Batman? And I don't think James. And imagine just having a very old Batman fight or be in the same group with Superman, Wonder Woman, and all the. It just, to me, it just doesn't look good. Clooney is still. He's not old, but he's still. He's young enough to where a Batman like him could still fight. Although, what is Clooney's age? Let's see. George Clooney's age. 61 years. 61 years. So I want to make sure. I thought I clicked out of something. No, I didn't click out. George Clooney 61. Michael Keaton is, I believe, Michael Keaton. 71. A 10-year difference. I mean, I guess it's somewhat enough to where you could say that the George Clooney Batman is still old enough to where he can fight, but he's at the end of it. But I don't see why James Gunn would start a universe and just immediately be like, oh, you know what, let's have a Batman that's only going to be around for a couple of years. Because with Ben Affleck, he was 40. That was still a long time to still create a universe around this Batman that can still fight, that can still do combat. With George Clooney, you only have like a couple movies and then that's about it. With Michael Keaton, you really only have one movie and that's about it. With Christian Bale, on the other hand, you have a Batman that's been there for a long time, right? And you could also make the argument that Christian Bale is the more popular Batman out of all these three. I know some of you Michael Keaton fans are mad at me, but I hear more people talk about The Dark Knight than I do about Batman 89. And also, like right now, y'all let me know in the comment sections, what do you hear more talked about? Michael Keaton's Batman movies or Christian Bale's Batman movies? So, there's another argument. I think the obvious answer is now Christian Bale. George Clooney doesn't really make sense. Christian Bale does. Michael Keaton doesn't seem likely. And really, I only think the real reason why Grace even added Michael Keaton is just so to keep the mystery. I will say it's interesting that Val Kilmer is not in the race for this. Because Val Kilmer is young enough to be a Batman. I'm saying it straight up. I think it's Christian Bale. Christian Bale, again, all the reasons. But again, we have to remember this is from Grace Randolph. She is not an actual, real, reliable source. She's just someone who you should take with a pinch of salt. Be like, hey, you know what? Maybe you're right. Maybe you're not. I don't know. We'll wait till the movie comes out. But that's how you take Grace Randolph scripts. Anyways, you guys let me know in the comment sections down below. Do you agree, disagree? Do you think this will happen? Do you not? Whatever it is, let us know in the comment sections down below. And I'll see y'all in the next one. And thank y'all for joining us here in the multiverse of movies. Ciao.
Where do you go to? Where do you go? Where do you go to?